Hi, everyone. This is Tom Salemi of DeviceTalks. Welcome back to the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. It's here, folks. It's here. The new phone books are here. No, not new phone books. DeviceTalks Boston is here. It's coming up this Wednesday and Thursday at the Boston Convention Exhibition Center. And I am excited, very excited. I'm excited because a lot of this, the work will be done. A lot of the work already is done. We're kind of at the point where we're just crossing the, what do you cross the I and you dot the T? Yeah. No, you dot the I and cross the T. And we've got a fantastic agenda there. I won't go over it. We'll be talking about it a bit in this week's episode. I'll be talking with Holly Scott of the Mullings Group, Peter Stebbins of Satio, and Paul Grand of MedTech Innovator about their roles at DeviceTalks Boston, but also about the state of MedTech more broadly. And fantastic managing editor Kayleen Brown will be doing a little preview of her conversation, her onstage conversation with Dr. Charisse Sparks, who had been the Chief Medical Officer at Inspire Medical Systems. So Kayleen will take the stage with Dr. Sparks at the start of day 2. And looking forward to that conversation. I'll be speaking with Yvonne Tonos, the CEO of Zimmer Biomet, and of Cecilia Soriano of Baxter. About both of them will be centered somewhat around, well, about their careers broadly, but also we'll tap into dealing with crises, not necessarily MedTech crises, but the kind of external crises that can impact a MedTech company. They both have great experience in the space, great thoughts in the space, and I'm looking forward to talking with them about that. If you go to the agenda, you'll see we'll talk about ASCs, we'll talk about surgical robotics, we'll talk about orthopedics. We've got it all covered. I won't go through it. Go to boston.devicetalks.com to register. But for all the amazing things we'll have on stage, I think what I'm particularly excited about is the opportunities to interact off stage. I put in our email this week that went out to folks, like, my lock of the day, my one certainty is that if you come to DeviceTalks Boston, you're going to leave it feeling more enthusiastic, you're going to leave it feeling more energetic, you're going to leave it feeling more optimistic, and you're going to leave it feeling more equipped to deal with all that's having to be dealt with today in the MedTech industry. Things keep piling on. Dials keep getting turned. And it was already a difficult industry to succeed in before. So I think those who attend will leave feeling better connected, feeling better informed, and that's why we're building this event. I went into journalism to inform and connect. We're doing that today at DeviceTalks Boston, and I sincerely hope you'll join us there. If what I'm saying is resonating with you and you haven't registered yet, let me know why. Shoot me a DM. I'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn. I do think if you do attend, you'll really be glad that you did, and would love to I don't know, just to hear why you're not coming or hear what we can do better to get you there. If you are going to be there, and I'll say this again, probably at the end of the podcast, but I've kind of ratcheted back my duties a bit on stage, just slightly. We'll be doing a lot of stuff around there, but with the direct purpose rather, to have more time to talk to folks. So if you see me, please say hello and tell me about yourself. Tell me about what you're working on. And I want to walk away with more stories. I want to walk away with more interactions, more unintended interactions, more actions of serendipity. And I'm looking forward to gathering with everyone that all of our device talkers, gathering them with them in one place. So really looking forward to DeviceTalks Boston. So go to boston.devicetalks.com. If you haven't registered already, you can register for the cocktail receptions. You can register still. We're almost out of seats. The Women in MedTech breakfast that Kayleen Brown has put together. Go on my LinkedIn feed, go on the DeviceTalks feed, check all the amazing people that she's recruited to be part of that conversation. I'm really so And I'm so glad that we have that as part of our conversation. And that'll be in the morning of day 2. So there's a lot for everybody. The expo floor is going to be rocking, and you're going to be able to meet great people who can do great things. So I am so excited about this week, and I hope you'll join us. If you haven't registered yet, please do it and use the code DTWeekly25 to save 25% off. If you have registered, again, say hello to me, please, and tell me your story. I'd love to learn more and understand what you're up to. All right. Before I start this podcast, so we'll open up with Kayleen's short discussion with Dr. Charisse Sparks. A little preview of what they'll be talking about on Thursday, and then I'll have my conversation with Holly, Peter, and Paul. Which sounds kind of like a band. Holly Scott, Peter Stebbins, and Paul Grand about MedTech and about their roles at DeviceTalks Boston. So, and of course, we are not done with events yet. We've got DeviceTalks Minnesota that's happening on June 11th. And DeviceTalks West, we've got a special announcement about DeviceTalks West coming up at DeviceTalks Boston. That's happening on October 15th and 16th. But DeviceTalks Minnesota looks fantastic. It's going to be a completely different beast than our other 2 events. A lot more intimate, a lot more focused on the cool tech, not only in the Minnesota area where there's so much of it, but also from outside the area as well. So I hope you will check out the still growing agenda for DeviceTalks Minnesota at minnesota.devicetalks.com. All right. So last pitch. Join us at DeviceTalks Boston. And if you're not going to be there, but you're at all intrigued by what I'm saying, shoot me a DM this weekend on LinkedIn. I'll be working, and would love to hear your thoughts about MedTech and what we can do to get you there this week. All right, folks. Really excited this week. The numbers look fantastic, and let's get it started. Let's go. I can't wait to see everybody at the convention center, and let's get this podcast started as well. Let's go. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Dr. Charisse Sparks, former Chief Medical Officer for Inspire Medical Systems, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I'm very much looking forward to having a little amuse-bouche chat with you today.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation, and I am psyched to have a chat with you today.
Oh, I love that. Well, Dr. Sparks, you will be a keynote speaker at our DeviceTalks Boston conference coming up April 30th and May 1st at the BCEC. Your session in particular will be 9:30 a.m. on May 1st, and I have the greatest pleasure of being on stage with you and having a one-on-one interview. And what I was hoping we could do is share just a little appetizer, a little razzle, a little dazzle for what we're going to talk through on stage here at the end of the month. If you're game, I'm game.
I'm all in.
All right,
All in.
excellent. So, Dr. Sparks, there's a lot of reasons why we invited you to be the keynote speaker at DeviceTalks Boston. But if I'm going to go back a little bit, I actually met you twice. So one virtually and then one in person. So virtually, I was working on producing a podcast, and we can't name names yet because the podcast isn't live, but we are still in production with that. And you were a guest on this podcast, again, that will be coming out soon. And I remember being so inspired by you and thinking how you communicate not just with grace, but you communicate this humbleness, which you don't necessarily get when you're talking to an orthopedic trauma surgeon in about 20 years. I don't think that I've ever said that word when talking about an orthopedic trauma surgeon. But I was so captivated by you. And then fast forward to last September, I had the pleasure of joining MedTech Women's MedTech Vision Conference. And Brooke Story was speaking on stage. And we all know Brooke. And she's a wonderful speaker. She's actually going to be keynoting at our DeviceTalks Minnesota conference, which is really just such a treat for me. But in the audience, Dr. Charisse Sparks rose her hand and asked a question. And I know this name. I know this person digitally from this podcast interview. And I remember watching you. And Dr. Sparks, you have a presence. There is this glow around you. And every single pair of eyes in that room they were stuck on you. And I have never in my entire 20 years in the medical device industry been in a situation where the audience member stole the stage for this brief moment in time. And the exchange between you and Brooke was important. It was, for me, very meaningful and valuable. And without a shadow of a doubt, in that moment, I went, we need to have Dr. Charisse Sparks on our stage. And I text Tom Salemi, our editorial director, and I said, Tom, we got to get Dr. Sparks on. And then I chased you down. I threw myself at you and I said, Dr. Sparks, would you please share your story with us? And that brings us to today. So I don't know if you know that full history, but I have been admiring you for many, many, many months now.
Well, thank you. I'm deeply humbled, and it is a privilege and truly an honor to have been invited to be the keynote speaker. And so I'm looking forward to it. And all of our interactions, Kayleen, I have just enjoyed immensely. And it's easy to project grace, I think, when you enjoy what you do and you know who you are. And I think I'm at that point in my life and in my career that both those things are true.
So well said. The embodiment of what I just set up. So let's talk a little bit about your session on May 1st at 9:30 in the morning. So what was very intriguing to me is that, and do correct me if I'm wrong, but you were Inspire Medical System first chief medical officer. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And prior to that, I was on the board, the public board of Inspire. And that we'll talk more about that during our session. But that's a journey that helped me get that role and share that role as chief medical officer at Inspire.
So I didn't expect this to be helpful for my prep, but I like my beauty with a purpose. That's kind of how I say. So this is a great way to have the conversation on May 1st really go back, which I didn't even know that you were on the board. I'm really intrigued by that. I want to talk about your background in MedTech, again, your orthopedic surgeon background. I want to talk about all of that on stage. But for now, why did Inspire Medical Systems need a chief medical officer? So what was the purpose of that role? And then we'll kind of dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think, as a medical device company, especially a highly regulated class 3 medical device, you need medical insight inside the company just to help strategically and also help you communicate with all customers, not only just your vendors, but you have physicians that you need to deal with and patients that you need to deal with. And so having somebody with a medical and clinical background was essential. And they were at a point in their maturation that they were at an inflection point, kind of going from that startup and everything moving really, really fast to really having to be an accommodating and compliant regulated medical device company. And it just seemed the right time to assign that C-suite level role.
Did Inspire have any specific goals in mind when the two entities or groups kind of came together to talk through what that could look like? I mean, was there an end vision that you were hoping to reach?
I'm not certain that I can speak for the CEO, Tim Herbert, as to all of his motivations, but I think many of them they had outstanding relationships with their physician customers, and through their direct-to-consumer marketing, they had outstanding relationships with customers, with patients who are customers. And they wanted to just ensure that as they did navigate a highly regulated medical device environment, they were just wanting to have that voice in the back so that all the programming that they had, all the educational materials that they had, all the regulatory documents, compliance documents were all in line with their vision of putting the patient first always.
So I have to assume then that must have been in line with your vision and your value or your belief in the medical device industry that putting the patient first is essential, priority number 1 through 3. Would you share that same value and vision?
That is 100% my North Star. I was privileged to be a physician, and it was by the grace of God that I was able to deliver care, change the lives of others, and then move to industry and impact more than one life at a time. So my life and my career journey has been a blessing throughout, but it would not have been had I not kept that at the center of my very being, is doing everything in service of patients.
That's the common thread that I hear in my 20 years in the medical device industry, and why I always say that this is the best industry in the entire world. To be motivated by such an important purpose is a privilege. It really is quite an honor. So I share that with you. And I'm so excited to share your story with our audience at DeviceTalks Boston. I know that we're going to want to dig into Inspire 5 and your influence there, and the FDA process. If you'd help us with your insights. And I know that a lot of our audience members either have gone through the process or are looking at the process, and certainly would value your insights and how to make that process have better outcomes for both parties. Is there any kind of off the top of your head, is just again an amuse bouche or just like a little preview of what you're talking about? Is there one or two insights or takeaways from that FDA approval process?
I think there's value in keeping in mind there's more than one way to skin a cat. As you approach the FDA, it's really relational. So understanding who the reviewers are, getting to know them, letting them truly know you, and then using all of the information available to you to support your filing is really important. There's not a book. FDA give you some guidelines to follow, but there's no playbook. And you have to decide where the value lies in your product, where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are. And then you have to understand the strategy by which you want to exemplify or amplify the values, and how you plan to mitigate the risks. And those are the big things in approaching the FDA.
That's already really helpful. And as I understand it, you have a rich medical and clinical research background. Do you think that that background has helped with that journey, the FDA journey, and your role as the former chief medical officer for Inspire?
I'd like to think so. And then I want to couple that with just an ongoing curiosity. So when I moved from clinical medicine to industry, I had to learn a lot because in my first role, within the first 2 weeks of my role, I was sitting before an FDA panel. And as a practicing surgeon, all I used to be sitting in front of were patients when I was doing surgery. So having to learn and having to capture so much information in a short period of time, I think that desire to be a curious learner has stood me in good stead my entire life. But having the ability to not only evaluate clinical evidence, but structure protocols and assess them, and also add the lens of my fiduciary duty to a commercial organization to meld those two together is a strength that I'm really proud of.
I'm really looking forward to digging into that, because it's almost like a third language, or a dialect of a language that both parties speak, but you're trying to be that bridge. So that has to take a lot of sensitivity and listening and a curiosity to learn, just like you were saying. So very excited to dig into that. What are you hoping, Dr. Sparks, to have our audience walk away knowing or understanding? Like, do you have a one or two goals in mind for our conversation?
Well, I just think right now, at this point in where we are in our nation's journey, there are a lot of things that are at play. And I just hope that we as people and as individuals that are providing the tools, instruments, the conduits for care of patients, I hope we don't lose sight of that part of humanity, that we are in service to others. So whatever is going on around us, we play an important role in being in service to others. And I would just hope that we all hang on to our own moral centers and move forward in a way that never loses sight of that North Star, the patient. And so I think right now, with everything impacting us, even from a commercial and from an innovation standpoint, we just have to keep the patient at the center of all that we do so that the things and the tools and the innovation that we provide can still reach patients in the way that we're used to seeing it do that.
Huge here. And with that in mind, I don't think that we should explore our topics any longer because I'd like to end on that very strong, very important message. And I'm going to do the best that I can to make sure that goal is realized. This is again at our Device Talks Boston conference. It'll be April 30th and May 1st at the BCEC. Dr. Charisse Sparks will be sitting down with me, managing editor Kayleen Brown, on May 1st at 9:30 in the morning. So I hope you join us. And then also please join us for the Women in MedTech breakfast. Dr. Charisse Sparks has been so gracious and will be a discussion leader. So we'll be helping my conversation with Tracy Warren, American Heart Association Ventures Tracy Warren, in our fireside chat. After that chat, we're going to break up into discussion groups. Dr. Sparks will be leading one of those groups. So come early, get a little preview of Dr. Sparks, sit down and enjoy our full conversation. Again, that's at 9:30 on May 1st. Dr. Sparks, I love every interaction with you, and I so appreciate how gracious you are with your time, and I cannot wait for our sit down here at the end of the month. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in Boston.
All right, so once again, Dr. Sparks will be the keynote speaker, the keynote guest on the morning of day 2. Just prior to that, Kayleen will lead a discussion at our Women in MedTech breakfast, where she'll talk with Tracy Warren of the American Heart Association, who's leading the American Heart Association's venture group, and will be on our venture panel later on in the day. They'll be talking that morning about the power of language, and it's going to be not a lecture or even a stage-centric experience. There's a whole group of discussion leaders, great leaders in the medtech industry that will be at the tables and be sort of be talking through the subject and exploring it with attendees. So it'll be a really productive conversation, and I hope you'll be part of it. If you haven't already registered, go to boston.devicetalks.com to register and make sure you sign up for the breakfast, which again is happening on Thursday, May 1st. That's day 2 of Device Talks Boston. All right, now let's begin my conversation with our favorite group, Peter, Paul, and Holly. No, actually, it's Peter Stebbins, Paul Grand, and Holly Scott of the Mullings Group. Hi, everyone. This is Tom Salemi of Device Talks. I'm here with 3 great supporters of Device Talks Boston. We're going to hear their take on what they're expecting to happen next week at Device Talks Boston, which is happening on April 30th and May 1st at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center. And we'll hear their individual perspectives on where the medical device industry is. So I'm joined today by Peter Stebbins. He's formerly of J&J, longtime MedTech executive. Now he leads a cool startup called Satio. We're here with old friend Paul Grand of the MedTech Innovator Group. Of course, one of the first phone calls I made when I started putting these events together. And finally, I'm happy to be joined by Holly Scott of the Mullings Group. Holly's been a great friend to Device Talks since I took over. It's nice enough to host me down at the studio once a year to record some cool stuff, and she's always putting out great content of her own on LinkedIn, offering some tremendous insights and analysis of the medical device industry. So we'll start off with you, Peter Stebbins. You're the Boston man. You're a local. You're involved heavily with Mass Medic. You've been on the board, and you're part of the Innovator scene right now. And I know you had some news of late from Satio. So tell us a bit about the company, about what you're working on, and if you have any sort of broader, I guess, lessons that or feelings about the Boston startup scene. Let's delve into those as well.
Yeah, sure. So as you may have seen, Satio completed a project for ARPA 8. So first of all, let's start with that. What is Satio? Who is Satio? And what is ARPA 8? So Satio is here in the Seaport in downtown Boston. It was founded by Namal Nawana, who people may recognize. I worked with him at J&J, And then he was the number 2 person at Lear, and then became the CEO of Lear, which is a big diagnostics company. They sold that to Abbott, about $12 billion. So it's all about diagnostics. And then he was the CEO of Smith and Nephew for a couple of years. Ultimately, I think he was doing some garden leave. He's continued to get, think about diagnostics and continue to decentralize care, just like he had done at ASC and in different parts of his career, but certainly to do it in the diagnostics space. And so after he left Smith and Nephew, he continued to have these ideas. He started a company called Satio, and he'd been doing some stuff on the design side. Ultimately, funded by the PE firm KKR, another company called Sapphiros, which is more on the molecular diagnostics and lateral flow side. And Satio continues to be essentially a diagnostics and drug delivery and medical device company. So that's Satio. And then ARPA-H, which people may or may not be familiar with, is the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Healthcare. It's akin to DARPA, which people may know from things like DARPANet, which kind of led to the internet and invention of GPS and things like that. And so what ARPA-H does is similar to DARPA. They come up with these big challenges. And Satio, which had been doing things, we have some products in the pipeline actually for the FDA right now for these patches for blood draw, which will allow you to very quickly and painlessly, draw either a bit of what we call Satio dot for certain type of things like HbA1c for diabetics, or down the road with a product where you can get a pretty good sized blood draw for everything. Ultimately, you're able to do all that right on your arm, basically in 15 minutes. You'll not only draw the blood, but you also get the results because we have a way to lyse that blood and actually give you some results right there. So that's in the works as well. But that company had been working in the area of diagnostics for things like yellow fever. Got asked by Institut Pasteur de Dakar to work on yellow fever for vaccines, and started working on microneedles for yellow fever. Ultimately, come circle to what we're talking about today, which is this program with ARPA-H, is this moonshot of doing something in drug delivery. And what they want to do, and really what all of ARPA does, is they come forward with challenges which are beyond what the current strategics would do, a bit beyond what the venture world is typically starting to fund. But there's clearly a need for customers and for society and then things like that. So that's where ARPA-H steps in and funds things. So we pivoted from a fully disposable microneedle drug vaccine delivery to what they asked us for. And again, as a moonshot, it's important to recognize that the ARPA-H program was actually developed under the first Trump administration, and then Biden continued on with it, got it fairly well fully funded, $1 billion or so per year. They've been at it for a little over 2 years. And so what they asked us to do was this challenge, and they gave us, several $1 million in about it took us 18 months, and had 2 big challenges to it. One was they wanted it to be fully intradermal. So intradermal means you're going just into under the skin. And as people may realize during COVID, it became obvious that using that level of intradermis versus rather than subcutaneous or even much intramuscular, you can get much better bioavailability. You actually cut the amount of dose you need by 5. So right now, something like Mucky Packs, which got into a bit of an issue with kind of urgent supply needs, they actually got that approved to be used with a much smaller dose, but it has to be done intradermally. The challenge with intradermal is it's really hard to deliver because when you use just a manual syringe, it doesn't go very well.
And I know, Peter, you're going to be presenting this at the Engineering Theater at DeviceTalks Boston. Curious, how has it been starting and running a company in Boston? Talk a bit for a moment, if you would, about the infrastructure and ecosystem for startups in Boston. And maybe, Paul, I'd love to get your take, and Holly as well. You both work so closely with the startup industry.
Yeah, sure. It's been really it's been excellent, and I think one of the nice things about the Boston area is that for something like this drug delivery, it's you've got a lot of expertise, both hires and consultants relative to different types of things on the device side, but then also if you go to look for getting feedback from pharmaceutical companies, and then also getting in feedback from say regulatory experts doing things like combination devices, which is a very unique intersection between the devices and drugs. Those are kind of hard to find around the whole country because you have this intersection of the two. So it's been very good for doing that. And as we moved along, it's been very supportive, both on hiring talent internally and talking to potential customers and hiring staff to be SMEs on everything from regulatory to manufacturing to the rest. So,
Holly, what are you seeing from the startup industry in Boston? How are things faring here for medical device companies?
The Boston ecosystem's always been a hot, active area for us, and it's no exception today. Even with the very unusual and chaotic news and everything else we hear going on, the private sector is still been positive and healthy growth. In fact, just looking at the numbers, this is not just Boston, this is overall industry. We're up 50% from invested funding Q1 2025 through versus 2024. And another, people get money and then they need people. So our business is in that camp, and we can see data that also shows a very strong number in growth in excess of 30%, 40% over last year as well. And Boston has the entire community there. You have, I believe it was Peter that mentioned that, you have the drug delivery companies, you have device partners, you have pharma partners, you have investors there, you have academics, you have such a fertile ground to get that cross-pollination. Yeah, it's no wonder that DeviceTalks Boston in particular is such a well-attended event based on location as well as based on the community that it pulls in.
Nicely done. Nice plug there, Holly. You're a real professional. Thank you for that.
Can't wait for my flowers after this.
And your red carpet. I promised you a red carpet. Paul Grand, you're leading the top MedTech incubator group or accelerator group, and please correct me and let me know how what term I should be using in the industry. How does Boston factor into all of you do? I know you're going to have 24 MedTech Innovator All-Stars there presenting in the open rounds portion of the conference, but they're not all from Boston. You're drawing from across the nation.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. So great to be here as always. MedTech Innovator, we're the largest accelerator in the world for MedTech, and 14 of our graduates are from Boston, or directly in Boston. There's some who are in the outside areas as well, but 14 from Boston proper. We continue to see Boston as a great ecosystem, a great hub for innovation. The companies in our portfolio that are from the Boston area continue to raise capital and perform. And I think we've only lost out of those 14 over the last 12 years, only one has gone out of business. So that's pretty good. And we've had at least one acquisition in there as well with Sanofi. So it's a great ecosystem. We're very happy with Boston. And as you mentioned, we have our Open Rounds showcase that'll be happening during Device Talks, which we're very excited about. We've continued to do this. This is our third year doing this together. This year it's called Open Rounds. We called it the All-Stars in the prior years, but now it's called Open Rounds Showcase because that mirrors a product that we have for investors that lets them have access to companies when they have open rounds, which is thus the name.
Very clever.
But really, really excited about it. And I can certainly tell you more about open rounds as we go.
How are you seeing we're talking about Boston here today, more broadly. How are you seeing the startup, the environment for startups right now? I had John Norris on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. He said it's a tough time to be raising money, but then again, it's always a tough time to be raising money. But what are you hearing from your alumni and from your current programmers?
Sure. Well, I'll start with Boston since that's the subject. So, in our portfolio, 4 of our Boston alumni raised capital over this past year, and significant capital in some cases. And as I said, we also had an acquisition as well, which was nice. Overall, in the portfolio, if we go beyond just Boston, we're continuing to see what I would call is pretty consistent for MedTech Innovator, which is, we have a trailing the last 12 months, one of the metrics we track. So that's about $1.7 billion in funding in our portfolio over the last 12 months. Those companies are raising all the time. We just had Puzzle Medical raise about 30 million US, 43 million Canadian in the last week. We have companies that are raising constantly. Alleviant Medical had a really nice round. It was a $90 million round. So it's not like these things aren't happening. As I said, we've had a lot of money raised by our portfolio, 150 funding rounds in the last 12 months. I think we've got in 2025 alone, we've got about 16 financings in the portfolio. So from January to now. So, things are definitely continuing. Companies are raising capital. They're more later stage rounds than they are early rounds. That's definitely a trend that we're seeing. If I look down the list, there's only a couple of seed rounds in there, and most of them are later stage VC. We had a Series A from Robite for 28 million, and that was early stage, but a lot of them are later stage. And overall, I would say that we're seeing a lightening in the. There was a while where companies that were at the clinical trial stage were really having difficulty raising capital for those studies, but it seems to be opening up a bit, and we're finding support for those. So we're encouraged about that.
Fantastic. Peter, going back to the ARPA-H program, I'm trying to remember, this is a Boston's, but what's the connection to Boston again? I remember that Massachusetts received a certain designation for this program. How does that work, and what does that offer startups?
Yeah, thanks. So it's really two separate things. Yeah, we won this contract on a national basis. We had
Okay.
this program. It just so happens that ARPA-H has as I describe it, their investor hub, and kind of like they try to distribute some of these things outside of Washington. So there's some administrators based here in Boston. So it is kind of like the flagship outside of DC is here in Boston, and that was something which was awarded to Boston about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, and was seen as valuable, and it was valuable to the community, and kind of kind of fed into this whole notion. But in terms of actual bidding on program, that's still a very national thing, and there's no special preference given to any of that.
Oh, okay. I see. And so how did the program go for you? Did it go smoothly? I mean, we're seeing some disruptions in other parts of the government-sponsored,
Yeah.
and not a laughing matter, but how did it go for you folks?
Yeah, so for us, it went well. So again, I started to say that there were two big challenges. One was having the fully automated intradermal at home, which is something nobody else is doing, and also it needed to be something where a physician, Wheeling, West Virginia, could inject into a patient with a chronic disease in the mountains of West Virginia. So it needed to be totally remotely controllable. So we had to figure out a way to do a full telemedicine session with vital signs and send stuff to your electronic health record and all the rest. So those two challenges were hard. We internally struggled for a bit, but then we got it worked out, and we were actually able to finish. We had an 18-month window. The only one of the suspense kind of came in toward the end was, as we were supposed to finish by the end of March. We started hearing rumors about the government shutdown and things like that. So what, we're going to go ahead and finish this thing 3 weeks early. Let's just get this all done right up front. And so we made sure that we were able to finish all of the development, as well as one thing that ARPA-H does is it needs to be, again, very different from NIH. You need to be essentially commercially available and commercially show that the commercial world likes your product. So you need to get letters of intent and other things like that from industry. So we're able to make sure we knocked all those things out. So, bit hectic toward the end. Of course, government didn't shut down. We probably could have done the normal time, but it's just an interesting time. I can imagine, some other people into these, SIBRs. We did a small business innovation research project and things like that. It's kind of a unnerving time for some of those, but we basically made it across the finish line just in time, got our last checks, and we're able to celebrate a little bit last week here in Boston, along with some people from Math Life Sciences and MedTech and things like that.
That's great news. Well, let's zoom out a bit and just talk about the state of the industry. And one of the things we're positioning and talking about DeviceTalks, we're presenting DeviceTalks Boston as an opportunity for us all to get together and to sort of touch base and to look for how others are viewing the pressures that are in the industry. We don't need to, in this podcast, get deep into what's going on in the FDA and otherwise. But Holly, I'd love to just, you talk to a lot of people, probably more people in a day than I talk to in a month. I'm kind of wondering what is the, what are you hearing from folks, and what kind of messaging are you and the Mullings group sort of bringing into your meetings at DeviceTalks Boston?
Well, I think the thing I get asked every single day is what's happening in young companies in their discussions with FDA. How is it impacting their business? And I can fortunately say right now, most of my companies are saying it's business as planned. The challenge is on the other side of that call, your reviewer is human, dealing in a human world within a chaotic environment. So how that's all going to shake out in terms of actual business operation, it's too early to tell. And it really does depend on what else is cut, if anything, right? So the reality of the young companies is we are not street dependent. It's private money going in, and the private sector is resilient. And as Paul mentioned, it's been tough, but the money is getting raised, and it's putting onus on young companies to tighten their story and make sure they get their clarity of vision and runway to reimbursement and runway to clinical set. We are also, as Paul mentioned, seeing a lot more activity on the clinical side. People are building out clinical infrastructures that are going to support efforts in a more thoughtful way than we've seen in the past. So we are seeing a resilience that I don't want to say I've never seen before, because I've lived through, I'm old enough to have lived through several recessions and 9/11 and all these other world catastrophes.
Sure.
The reality is we are seeing people drive in this industry and just keep going. And it's great. That's why I love it. That's why I love it. It's like when the tough times come, they just get tougher. And that's what we're seeing happen. The young companies that have been pitching, hundreds and hundreds of times are just continuing to go, but learning along the way. And, thanks to programs like MedTech Innovator, are much more prepared. And the funding's there. Like I said, $1.6 billion in first quarter into the private sector. And that's $500 million over what it was a year ago. So things are happening. The money's out there, and the money's going to our industry. It's a matter of ensuring that you're following the right bellwethers for that in terms of market. I'll also comment on the heavy activity in neuromodulation, neurostimulation, structural heart, areas that are tough and hard to address, yet they're mechanical and electrical and have a real solution. So it's much, I don't want to say it's easy, because nothing's easy, but it's easier than it has been the last few years to sell the SaaS stories that were all the rage in 2020, 2021, and seeing those dollars come in. So the time is good. The time, actually, it's a great time to be in MedTech, because you learn the hard way and the lessons now, and it's going to set you up for good success. So as I counsel with individuals driving their career and managing where they're going career-wise, follow the money, follow good leadership, follow the markets that are continuing to grow. And I'm a big fan of the show, but the Device Talks West and the conferences that are really rooted in what is next are critical, not just to go and glad hand and say hello to everybody. It's really critical to understand and hear from the thought leaders what they're paying attention to and what trends to follow and stay close to, because that's where opportunity lies.
That's great. No, that's good insights, and we'll try to provide plenty of that. We'll have Ivan Tornos opening things up from CEO of Zimmer Biomet, and he certainly has a perspective and is not afraid to share it. So we'll be hearing some of his thoughts for sure. Paul, you're plugged into the MedTech Innovator Nerve Center. You're hearing from all over the world. What's your sense of how people have responded to, again, at a high level, some of the new pressures on the MedTech industry?
Well, I think if people have not raised money, let's say in the last year, and they're getting close to running out of cash, and they're doing a new round, I think the companies that have not yet recalibrated for delays, or maybe everybody should be recalibrating for
Sure.
delays. But if they're in a regulatory process, they have to be recalibrating for delays and making adjustments to be able to weather the storm, if you will, of whatever, amount of time things might be disrupted, because there's definitely going to be disruptions. So I think that's one major thing that's going on in the industry, and whether it's a 3-month delay or a 9-month delay or a year delay or whatever, I think everyone has to be prepared for some delays in what you were anticipating previously. And I know a lot of our companies are doing that. And that might mean making adjustments to their team and laying off some people. It might mean hiring in some cases, because some of these companies are growth companies. It also might mean doing things to change your enrollment strategy. I mean, I've seen companies change from, there was one that was changing from a de novo to a 510K strategy to try and get to the market faster. It's just, it all depends on the company and what their cash forecast is. But there's no question that it is going to be a challenging environment in terms of schedule to your next milestone, perhaps. So the other thing that we're seeing from companies is raising more capital if they can. Now, maybe not in every case. I just talked to one a couple days ago who told me that they were going to cut. They were trying to do like a $30 million round, and they're cutting it back to like a $15 million round because they see a shorter term milestone that they can hit. And they want to adjust their funding for that. And I was saying, maybe you want to go the other way and raise more capital if the money's out there. And, and then they said, well, it's valuation that, we're sensitive to. And of course, entrepreneurs have to be sensitive to valuation. But I always tell people that take the money while you can get it. You don't know what the market's going to be like. And also, from a dilution perspective, investors are pretty good about topping up management where needed to keep them incented, because if management doesn't have the right incentive, they're not going to perform. So, everyone understands that, the environment may be difficult for some, and as I said, you gotta be prepared to take the capital if you need it. We have, bringing it back to Device Talks, we have that open round showcase where you mentioned there's going to be 24 companies presenting, and they're raising everything from seed through Series C rounds right now. And I think they're raising like an average of $10 million in their round, which is a pretty good average for an amount of capital. And the smallest ones I think are like $1.5 million, and the biggest ones are raising like $50 million rounds with some of them. So there's a nice variety in there. But I guess the last thing I would say in terms of what we're seeing is that we're seeing more corporate venture in some of these deals than we've seen before. So a whole bunch of these companies have corporates in them. A lot of the companies that are in the open round showcase at Device Talks have lead investors already identified They've got significant capital already committed to these rounds. So these are not like I'm raising 15 million and I've raised zero so far. Most of the ones that are presenting at DeviceTalks are doing something like a $17 million round, where they've got 4 more to go, or they're raising a $5 million round and they have 2 more to go. So they've got term sheets and people committed, and we're seeing quite a bit of that. So that's a good trend.
That's great. No, that's those companies are essentially ready to go, looking for 1 or 2 more final pieces. It sounds like. So hopefully we can help them find the support they need.
It's kind of the one that I really like what John Norris said last week on your device. This MedTech, especially I see a lot of the biotech, and I've been interacting with I think the MedTech space is in a good spot. I think from a capital raising perspective, and then to some extent probably on an FDA perspective. And touch wood, it's going to be a challenge for lots of people, but I think we've got a real good solid process. And as some people were mentioning, some of these devices with going for some significant trials in neuromodulation and heart failure and some of the things out there. That's good solid science, good solid engineering, and pretty if you do the right study, can get it through. So it's going to be good.
That's great. And final point. So you're doing double duty then at DeviceTalks Boston next week. You'll also be one of our future of presenters. We've got you have Steve Bell, a surgical robotics expert, and Dr. Scott Sigmund, orthopedic surgeon, host of the Ortho Show, goes by the Fro. We'll have each of you giving sort of small short presentations about the future of neuro and ortho and surgical robotics. Peter, you took neuro. I'm anxious to see what you see coming down in this space. Anything you can share at this point, or should folks just make a point of being at DeviceTalks on the morning of May 1st to see your presentation?
Yeah, they should make a point of being there. But again, I just think it's really a fascinating space. That's what we talked about, me covering ortho. But I think the vitality and the things that are going to be solved in the neuro space are so all encompassing that I think it's just a really interesting future to talk about. Some of it's going to be right now, the next 10 years. You can see a lot of things. Some of the stuff we're going to discover over the next 10 years, but you won't see any products for another 10, 20 years or whatever. But I really think it's going to be it's a great, incredibly broad space. And to some extent, because of issues on just the downside risk of doing something wrong in the brain, and how small things are, to some extent, there's even a decent amount of runway just to be catching up to other parts of the body in terms of some of the technology. And it's in a good space for both some short term and some long term growth. So there are some challenges we'll talk about.
Excellent. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing folks at DeviceTalks Boston. And I want to thank you three in particular for the support you're giving me and DeviceTalks over the past 5 years to help this show grow. I really could not have done it without your support. So thank you all sincerely very much for that and for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, we love being part of DeviceTalks. It's a phenomenal event. DeviceTalks Boston has been fantastic to us, and our companies always come back raving that they had great meetings. They met all sorts of people that they may not be meeting at other conferences, and they appreciate that. And I think that's part of the beauty here is it's an additive thing to the ecosystem. It's not just duplicating something they can get somewhere else.
Yeah, and speaking of being additive, what I especially like about DeviceTalks is, especially now with the work that Paul's doing, there is that perspective of the startup and the investor interaction. But what it has is as a normal medical device professional, it gives you an opportunity if you really go through the 2 days of the agenda and pick the things that are going to help you as an engineer or a QA professional or the VP of sales or whatever. You can actually learn from experts about doing your job, which sometimes in some of the investor conferences it's a lot about startups and those dynamics. It's interesting to hear, but in terms of actually doing your job better as a senior director somewhere, I just love what DeviceTalks Boston and some of my favorite presentations in a long time were at Device Talk, people like Megan Scanlon and Jenny Lee talking about, voice of customer, just things like that you're not going to get at an investors conference, but you see all day long on both days at Device Talks.
Great. I'm so glad that that comes across. That's definitely something we try to build MedTech for the rest of us, and we definitely try to provide a different perspective because there are a lot of great conferences out there, but we can all do some things a little bit differently. So thank you for the kind words again and for the support, and look forward to seeing you next week at Device Talks. All right, well, that is a wrap. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the Device Talks Weekly Podcast. I sincerely hope you'll join us at Device Talks Boston this coming Wednesday and Thursday at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center. You can register at boston.devicetalks.com. Use the code DTWeekly25 to save 25%. We'd love to see you there. I think it's going to be an important meeting. I think it's a great opportunity for everyone to get together and talk about the making of MedTech companies, the making of medical devices, and what the big next is. So if you're interested in finding out what the big next is and how we're moving forward, join us at Device Talks Boston. If you have questions, thoughts, or comments about the conference, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn. Would love to answer them and make sure you have all the information you need to be at the event. It's going to be a fantastic 2 days. Please follow the Device Talks Podcast Network. Please connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already. Connect also with Kayleen Brown and Chris Newmarker of Mass Device. And make sure you follow Mass Device and Device Talks on LinkedIn. Would very much like to see you at Device Talks Minnesota, but I'll save that pitch for next week when we're done with Device Talks Boston. But that's happening on June 11th, and I'm really, really proud of that event. It's going to be a different event. I think one that the community is already embracing. Good numbers there for registration, and excited to be able to give that, I would say, 100% of my attention, but I'm already working on Device Talks West. We've got some big news there we'll be unveiling at Device Talks Boston. So, all right, folks. Again, we'd love to see you this week. I hope we have the opportunity to shake hands. If you are attending and you see me, I intentionally try to ratchet back on my onstage responsibilities, so I'll have some time to interact with all of you. I'm always kind of buzzing from point A to point B. I will be busy. I'll be busy on stage. I'll be busy downstairs in the podcast studio, but we'll take time on the expo floor. We'll walk around, and we'd love to meet you in the hallways and at the receptions on site. And those that will be offsite, I'll try to be at the Goodwin event on Tuesday night. So, all right, that is a wrap, folks. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Device Talks Weekly Podcast. Next week, we'll have our live podcast episode from the stage of Device Talks Boston. I'll get a couple of special guests lined up to give you a wrap-up of what you missed. But if you're there, you will not have missed a thing. So do that instead. Take care, everybody.